Hey guys, Justin Nelson here with the Leverage Podcast or Delegation Roundtable, as many of you guys know it. And today we have an awesome guest with us whose name is RJ. And I'm going to let RJ kind of get a little bit more into exactly what he does. I've seen clips of his across influencers across the globe for many, many years now. And I think we've been Facebook friends for a good bit of time now. And I've always kind of seen from a distance what he's been up to, but never had the chance to truly like talk one-on-one. And so, RJ, I'm stoked to have you on, man. And you are all the way across the globe. I won't steal your thunder, but I would love for you to tell the audience where you're from, what you're up to, and kind of what you got going these days.
First of all, Justin, thanks so much for having me. Super excited to finally get the chance to connect and have the conversation. And yeah, man, like I live in Pakistan in Islamabad right now, and I'm ahead of time. I can tell you, you'll expect night in a few hours because I can predict it. so, so yeah, living in Pakistan from quite a while. It's been 9 years. I was born in Saudi Arabia, now in Pakistan for the past 9 years, and I'm talking on the podcast with you.
I love it. And I know you're kind of probably more of an expert than even myself in this area. So kind of tell the audience, like, what is it that people know you for and what is your day-to-day business?
Yeah. So people know me mostly because of my podcast. I've been doing podcasting for the past 6 years now. I started my podcast back in early 2020, right around the time of COVID. Prior to that, I started my podcast, and of course, like following, content from Russell, from his challenges and book that got that idea. He talked about the concept of being a reporter, and you can create your authority by associating yourself with the right people. So that idea just fascinated me a lot. So that's how I started. So people know me all around podcast and stuff. And right now, at the moment, I'm running a podcast post-production agency where we handle everything end-to-end for our clients for their podcast on a retainer basis. And that's exactly what we offer to our clients.
I love that. So talk to me a little bit about your journey. Like, how does someone, obviously as a virtual assistant company owner, I own Sphere Rocket, and I obviously am used to working remote, right? Like, I'm used to my team members being in the Philippines, Latin America, all across the world. But it's not every day that someone like yourself just wakes up in Saudi Arabia, right, Pakistan, and goes, I want to network with as many business owners in America. It's probably not what your friends were doing. It's probably not what a lot of people in your city do. So like, talk to me, like, what's that journey and what's that story look like? Like, how did you get connected with people like Russell Brunson and all these different people I've seen you interview? Like what was your first connection, and how did you start just doing that?
Yeah, honestly, like I never thought about like I'm gonna be able to like start a podcast, let alone be on a camera. Because first of all, like English is not our first language, right? So like just thinking about that, be able to like speak fluently in English was such a big challenge. And prior of me getting into online world, I had my own piano channel. Like I like to play piano, but kind of like anonymously. It's like just my hands are there playing the keyboard, recording it. And I remember like I had got like 1,000 subscribers, and I thought to do a face reveal. And honestly, I never did. I'm like, how I'm gonna look like on camera, all that stuff. And this is like prior of me getting into the like, online world. I was like, man, how people gonna judge me, all that, etc. So never thought about like this is gonna eventually gonna happen. But then got myself admission in the university in like right around like late 2018. So I was like basically free. So got the idea about drop shipping at that time. So that was kind of like my first foot in the door. I was like, okay, cool. Like, let me explore. Let me see how it works. And again, I was just started creating these drop shipping stores. But then I was like, how am I going to get paid? Because in Pakistan, we don't have Stripe. We don't have PayPal. We don't have these payment gateways. So that's the very first challenge I had. And while I was in Saudi, living there pretty much all the time, I was teaching tuition with my mother. So she was compensating me, like paying me, like, let's say $100 a month for teaching tuition with her. So that was the saving I had, which I used to form company in US, getting my Stripe account, starting my Shopify store on like a Black Friday in 2018, and didn't work at all because fundamentals weren't there. I had no idea how product works. I had no idea how ad work, all that, etc. Had zero idea. And I was just like, running it and expecting how Guru says, like printing money, all that.
Yeah. I love that. So how did you set up an account in the US? Because like I know like when I first started setting up
Yeah,
accounts, we started our company in the Philippines in 2020, and in the United States we had places that we could go to get lawyers and they'd show us how to set up
yes, yes.
accounts in the Philippines. You probably didn't have a lot of that like easy guidance at your so
I had no
like
idea.
how'd you figure that out? Because like I to this day couldn't even figure out how to do that.
Honestly, I had like no idea at all at first how to do it. But yeah, if you remember, like there was a guy, his name is Sebastian Gomez. He
Okay.
was into like online space like pretty early on. He's still here in the space, but not that super active.
Yep.
He was from Costa Rica, so it's again like out of US. So he was creating more content towards like how to form US LLC company, like which state you should choose, Delaware or Wyoming, right?
I see.
Then you need to have like a EIN number. So I just found a company who can help me form a US company, got that done. But then after that, I needed to have like a EIN number, which is like a tax number.
Yeah.
And I didn't had enough money left because I invested pretty much all my money to just invest in forming the company.
Yeah.
And then like the $100 that was costing me to form EIN, I didn't had that. So I was like to that same like registered agent, I was like, is that possible that I just fill the form and you just let me know if that's correct or not so I can send it to IRS?
Yeah.
Because I don't have the money for getting any services. And she was like kind enough to say, like, yes, sure, I'll let you know what's right or wrong. And she let me to borrow her fax
Nice.
because you can either like call them or they can like fax you your EIN number, at least at that time.
Yeah.
That's how I got my EIN number even at that point, because I had no idea and I had you know, no ability of like understanding of jargons, technical aspects of it, zero. But then all I knew was I was just following that guy who was just showing me some steps put in the door.
I
That's
love that.
what I
I love
did.
I love that. So you go from, obviously an idea, drop shipping, you're like, all right, in order to do this, I obviously have to get a bank account. And you
Yeah,
kind of you went through like an unknown. Like, a
yeah,
lot of people might have just quit right there and went, oh, that's hard, right? But you found someone, you found a mentor through a course, however you bought that, learned how to do it. Talk to me about like the journey from there to podcasting, because it
yeah,
doesn't, because you didn't start with going, I want to start a podcasting company, right?
exactly.
So like what led you to podcasting? And then I'd love to hear a little bit more about like, I know there's like podcast agencies that help you get
Yes,
on
yes,
podcast. I know there's ones that help you manage your own podcast. I'd love to
yeah,
hear kind of like what your podcast agency does. So talk to me
yeah.
about how'd you go from I've got a bank account, I'm ready to rock and roll, to now the successful podcast that you have.
Yeah, perfect, perfect. So yeah, I mean, like I was just stumbling upon everything for a few months. Dropshipping didn't work out for me, and right around that time, I saw a post by someone like, this guy have made like $3 million in 90 minutes. Russell Brunson, co-founder of ClickFunnels. Like, damn man, I was telling to my mom, I was like, how a guy have made like $3 million from a stage that is hard
Was
to
was
comprehend.
that a 10x stage?
Yeah, it was the
Okay.
next stage. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it was right around that time, right? So I was just so shocked, I can't even comprehend like how that was even possible.
Yeah.
So yeah, when I started getting into like ClickFunnels or Russell Brunson world, I started to realize like more concept. The first book I got was .com Secrets. Read through that book and got me more idea towards like, hey, there is a world like that. There are frameworks, fundamentals, all that. Then affiliate marketing got me my first sale. I went through one funnel away challenge where he talked more towards the concept of Dream 100 and
Yeah.
of course like building relationship, all that, etc. So right around early, as I mentioned, like early 2020, like my very first guest that I had officially on my podcast was Spencer Makem.
Oh, cool.
Uh, yeah, Spencer was my very first guest. Unofficially, I had Alex Elliott. I did like one of like interview with her because she was promoting her program at that moment. But
Yeah.
Spencer was my very first guest I had on my show. I was like, I just want to have people on my podcast that I would love to learn from. I had no idea what to monetize
Yeah.
whatsoever. I just want to learn from these people, kind of like for free at no cost. Inviting people on the podcast, I had no strategy whatsoever other than just reaching out to them like a desperate person.
I love
That's
that.
exactly what I did.
I love that. So you kind of started with like, you didn't know, I call it imperfect action,
Yeah.
right? You're like, I want to make action. I don't know how to do it perfectly, but I'm just going to do it. So like, what was like you said, the purpose of your podcast was selfishly just to learn from really
Yes.
awesome people. At what point did it like transition from like, I'm doing this selfishly, which is a good selfish. Like, I think I teach my audience all the time, like there's a good type of selfish, like that's a good thing because you're getting content, they're getting content. When did it transition from just like, I want to learn from awesome people to like, wow, I could make some money off of the
Yeah.
podcast world. Like how did you start making your first money, from those podcasts?
I feel like it took me 1 year of my time to go from running a podcast to starting an agency, because while around that time when I started my podcast, 2 or 3 months down the line, people started to ask me these questions. People were like, "You're like 20 from Pakistan. Like, how are you interviewing these like bigger names on your
Yeah.
podcast? Like, how they even like coming on your podcast even in the first place, let alone
Yeah.
talking?" So I did launch my first like a course or type of program where people like enrolling in and learning how I do all that steps. But again, I feel like the probability of something for it to happen is like not that higher, because in
Yeah.
agency you have more control of like how you can operate stuff and how you control stuff. So I was like, nah, man, doesn't make sense. People did got some results what they wanted, but again, the probability is like higher or lower depending upon like how they implement it. Sometimes they get overwhelmed, all
Yeah.
that. So right around that time, like somebody invited me on her podcast, and we had this conversation like how being from a Pakistan, able to like interview these people on my podcast. And after the podcast ended, she was like, "Is that possible that you would run my podcast right now and invite guests on my podcast as a service and handle production?" I was like, "Sure. I mean, why not?" And she was like, "How much are you gonna charge?" I was like, "I have no idea. Like maybe $1,000 for 4 episodes and 4 guest bookings."
Yeah.
And right now, that's definitely gonna be like a dumb deal to do. But at that moment, that was kind of like a beginning for me to think about. And honestly, like those 4 episodes that I booked like some pretty big names on her podcast at the time. Like
Nice.
Maren Golden was on her podcast. Amanda Holmes was on her podcast.
Okay.
Some
Yeah.
decent names. But the problem was, since everything was relied on me as like a one-man show, that client just went away after 2 months.
Makes
And
sense.
I was literally hating the process that I loved to do for my own, just because I didn't had any systems in place, and I was doing for myself because I liked it. But when I started to do it for others, it was a dreadful process.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And it's like, it's hard to scale. I kind of say it's like scaling your own demise, right? A lot of people will say, because, we provide assistance to a lot of people where I'm like, they're like, maybe we could wait for an assistant or leverage or like, but I'm like, if you have success doing what you're doing now, let's say you go double your business and you're doing it by yourself, you're ultimately going to build this like cage that you absolutely hate to be in, even though you might be making a lot more money than you ever have before. So talk to me like how did you like scale? Like how did you find leverage? Did you hire people or did you change the systems or automations?
Yeah.
Like how'd you pivot?
Yeah. So the very first hire I made, apart from me being a solopreneur, was a video editor. I was
Okay.
like, because at that time, what my role was, what I was doing, creating thumbnails on Canva, editing the video, editing in like a IGTV style. At that time, it was like really in at that moment,
Yeah.
IGTV style formats, and publishing it, handling guest outreaches. That was kind of like overwhelming. So I thought about like doing the very first hire as like a part-time video editor. So I started to pay that guy like $50 a month
Yeah.
here in Pakistan, and had him to do like part-time stuff for me. That was kind of like my first delegation. And right around that time, like I heard Russell talk about this, that when you hire somebody, you have that itch of like touching what's going wrong, and it just speak and like just correct it right at the moment. But you have to stop that. You have to stop that itch.
Yeah.
Do not go and fix it. You have to let them do it and then let them know like what was right or wrong.
Yeah.
Because if you're gonna be there fixing it pretty much all the time, then they're not gonna learn it, and you're not gonna accept it. That how things gonna look like. So yeah, that was my first hire, and then I trained my. I told my brother like, hey, you're doing pretty much nothing, so start learning graphic designing, something along those lines. So he started learning graphic designing.
Yep.
Now he's pretty pro expert, all that etc. So second hire was my graphic designer, but then like we slowly went from there. But my earlier hire was, video editor and a graphic designer.
I love it. I love it. And so then from there, it sounds like you're probably still doing a lot of the outreach and trying to find new customers. And like, how did you find your first customers? Were you finding customers through your podcasting strategy? I'd assume you were probably still interviewing a ton of people and
Yes, yes.
then turning them into customers. Talk to me about that, because I think a lot of people watching this, I think they have great offers and great products,
Yes.
but they don't have enough people. Like I'll give you an example. I've been doing like 3 to 4 podcast episodes a day. And my last podcast an hour ago, he showed me but I was still able to just like open my laptop and like
Yeah.
continue working throughout my day. And then an hour later, I get to meet an awesome person like you that's brand new, increase my networking, connections, value to the world. So, like, how did you continue to grow that business? Like, even though you had video editors, your brother was doing graphic design, like, how did you acquire your next 10, 20, 30 customers?
So after I had kind of like a worse experience with my first client, and it had like similar patterns later down the road too, because of, like, for example, some referrals. The initial growth that I've seen in my agency was the first few clients that were really great was my podcast guests in the past too.
Okay.
And I didn't realize that at first. Then I was like, I worked with clients who were kind of like pain in the butt.
Yeah.
And I had clients who were like really great, never bother, kind of like a $550,000
Yeah.
client.
Yeah.
Just paid, thank you. So then I realized, like, I have like interviewed so many people and I can qualify so many people from that list instead of finding new people right now. I should just focus on these set of people. That if they do have a plan to start a podcast, I should present my offer in such a manner that they would ultimately going to become my customer. If they
Yeah.
have a plan to start a podcast, I feel like I don't want to convince them, because I tried. The cycle to convincing to start a podcast is just so long. I don't want to do it anymore. I don't
Yeah.
want to convince anyone like why you should start a podcast. I want to
Um,
have somebody who is planning to start a podcast, or somebody who already have a podcast but it's not that great. These are my dream clients I want to work with, and might be on my podcast too.
I love that.
So that's the type of people I've started went back, and like some most of the people I actually got as clients later down the road were my podcast guests, and I was able to like build a relation with them so that they can become my customers. So yeah, that strategy worked out really great for me personally. I was like, okay, I have those leads that I can work with now, since I'm already in connection with them,
Yeah.
and convert them into customers.
I love that. So did you start to do more podcasts at that point? Like for the audience that's listening here, like some people might be like, I'm going to do 100 podcasts a week. And we know that's not sustainable. But were you doing like 1 to 2 podcasts a week, meeting new people? Were you doing one a day? Like whenever you were growing your business, like how aggressive were you being and interviewing new guests?
So my concept was, so I was doing like once a week. Right now, even though right now I'm posting, I have like 20 in already recordings that I have already available for next season. So right now I'm not kind of like recording any. And for the reason why is because the way how I work is like I show them what my work looks like, right?
Yeah.
For example, if I did the episode with them, I just want to show my work. For example, I have these badass trailers where they are featured as a guest. That shows how they're looking on my episode, right?
Yeah.
If they love it, I can be like, hey, this is exactly what my work is, and this is exactly what I offer.
That makes sense.
So I just present them in a manner where when I post it, like they, in most cases, like either becomes client, generate a referral for me, all that etc. So for that to happen in a great manner, I can't interview like 100 people and then just let it slide, or like be in that backlog for like a year. It happened for me once, so I don't want to repeat that process again. So normally what I do is like I like to record the podcast in a manner where it can be posted early, right on time. They can see my work, they appreciate it, and then I'll be like, hey, I do offer that as a service in case you don't know about it, so that we can go from there. So that's kind of like something I work with.
I love that. So like what was the what would you say like someone should shoot for as a conversion rate? And again, I know you weren't necessarily only shooting podcasts to close people. I'm sure you were also still interviewing people to just get relationships and build networking and referrals. But like, like if someone's going to dedicate, let's say 50 episodes a year, like, to their target market, like how many clients, should they be looking to get out of that? And again, I know the price point matters and what they do matters, but like what would you say they would have to do client count wise out of 50 podcasts to make it worth their time and investment, or maybe to even just know like, hey, something's wrong. I've done 50 podcasts and did one deal. Like maybe they're doing something wrong quality wise, or they're targeting the wrong guests. Like what would you say is a rule of thumb? If you did 50 podcasts, how many deals would you want to close from that?
Well, I would say like to be realistic towards it, if you're doing it in a manner like how I personally do it, I feel like let's say I've interviewed like 150 people on my podcast.
Yep.
I feel like there must be 20% somewhere along 10 to 20% depending upon like how you are experienced or like a beginner. 10 to 20% is like a sweet spot conversion rate of the number of guests you had on your podcast.
Yep.
Because I feel like what most people get stuck on is, first of all, they don't have enough right in the beginning when they're starting a podcast and they're working on their skill set. They don't have enough conviction towards their skill set.
Mm,
Just because of that reason, they just go and target those people out there as a service provider who are just beginners.
yeah.
It takes longer to get results, dreadful client, nags a lot, pays less,
Yeah.
crazy ass process. So yeah, you were about to say something?
Oh no, I was gonna say, like, so talk to me about that. Like, if I start a podcast today
Yeah,
and I go target, like, a lot of my audience knows me from the
yeah,
real estate game. If I
yeah.
targeted 100 real estate agents that were all brand new, they're gonna be broke. So even if I have
Oh
great
yeah, for sure.
conversations, I have great podcasts, no one's gonna want to buy my real estate agent ads course, right? Because they're all broke. And so, like,
Yeah,
how did you target these big names? Like, and I'm gonna make a prediction, and you can tell me
yeah,
if I'm wrong, right? But like for me, when I first got started, I was afraid to reach out to these people because I thought they were like gods, right? I thought they were gurus. I
yeah,
thought they were
man.
like better than me, and maybe some
Yeah,
act that way. But like I think I realized most of them are just normal human beings that will reach out back more than I ever imagined. So like,
oh
how
yeah.
did how did you get a hold of these big names and get them to respond to you?
I feel like you just have to get few yeses in the beginning, right? So you
Yeah,
just have to have enough like courage to like reach out to people and start to realize they're not gonna bite you back.
yeah,
All if they're gonna say is like just no.
yeah,
I mean, like I when I reached out to like Spencer or any other people like that, I just reached out to him. He was like, I don't have any time for 2 months right now. I was like, I'll wait.
yeah,
After 2 months, I just followed up with him right around the Traffic Secrets launch, and he was like, let's do it, man.
yeah.
Interviewed him, reached out to Akbar Sheikh, had him on my podcast, reached out to like the Funnel Dog, like had him on the podcast, right? So it was just the like cycle I was going with, and I was
Yeah.
doing multiple outreaches. Some of them were saying yes, some of them were saying no, somebody was not responding at all. So it's just like you have to start with a courage and be okay with getting no's, because right now your current state isn't even like better. So
Yeah.
like working towards it is the only process that's there left.
I love that.
So
I love
so
that.
yeah.
Do you think you started to like experience like extra exponential growth once you started to get, like, for me, like when I first found out about you, I looked at your page and I saw like Russell and a few others that I knew, and I was like, oh, like
Yeah,
that's a good podcast. Like, do you think after you got a few big names, I know they weren't like your first guest ever, and
yeah.
like, but like as you got a few, did you find it easier to get other people on the podcast once you had a few big names on, or no?
I would say for sure, 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, like Russell was my 100th guest, so it
Okay.
took me like 100 episodes. Even when I go to events here, they're like, "Oh, easy for you to say because you had Russell." I was like, I had 99 episodes prior to that, before I had Russell on my podcast.
Yeah.
So, but like having him on the podcast, things definitely made easier because now when I reach out to people, I'm like, hey, I already had Russell on a podcast. I had like CEO of Flippa, CEO of like Thrivecard, Dan Henry was on the podcast, right? So when I start to like leverage these names, it becomes easier because even though from a vanity wise, for some people it might not sound big, but they're like, if they're coming up for a reason.
Yeah.
So it does affect 100%. So that's exactly what the goal looks like, right? There's a guest pyramid. You never go to like A star, top level star first. You start with the low hanging fruits, and then you raise in the pyramid later on.
I love.
Because even if you go to the higher level, you're not ready for it. I was never ready for Spencer to be on the podcast because I asked so many dumb questions. I literally had him on my podcast 60 episodes later just to do some justice to him.
I love that.
So
I love that. And that's kind of when I first got started many years ago, I did the same thing. I started with my friends, my family. They didn't even own businesses, and it
yeah,
was just to kind of get it out. So what's the like number one piece of advice if someone's listening? Because I have a lot of followers from the Philippines, right? And like, for example,
yeah,
last month we hired 300 people. Like, we placed 300 virtual assistants with United States-based business owners, but we got 70,000 applications to work for us. And so
wow,
that means 69,700 were, it's not that they weren't good, they just didn't make the cut, right? And so, sometimes those 69,700 people, they get upset at me or they're mad at me, and it's just that they weren't picked, right? It has nothing to do with them as a human being. They're great people.
Yeah.
They just didn't make the cut. And so for those people that are like, man, I didn't make the cut. Like, I didn't get a job with an American based company that I dreamed of. Like, for you didn't wait for like a BPO or a VA company to help connect you to America, right? And I think that's what a lot of people in the Philippines are waiting for, is they're waiting for someone just to make the connection. And, there's companies like ours that can help make those connections, but I can't make 70,000 connections a month. I can make 300, right? So if someone like that's listening to the podcast right now, like, what advice would you give them to not like put their fate in the hands of a company or a matchmaker or a platform? Like, how can they like take initiative to go straight to the source, whether it's finding a job, whether it's starting their own business, whether it's, doing something like a drop shipping or selling or social media agency? What advice can you give someone as someone that's lived outside of America, but you serve a lot of American based companies?
Well, I have really brutal advice. The first advice I have is for anyone, like, it's not just only Philippines, like anyone who's living in these like tier 3 countries. It's like, don't fall into inferiority complex. Just don't think that you are kind of like in a lower status just because you're living in countries like these. And that's exactly how the problem actually starts. They're like, not offensive to my American friends.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Like, oh, they're Americans, they're British. Damn, like, who are we? Right? I feel like getting past that is the first initial step. Thinking about that, it's just something, first of all, you don't have any control with. You're born in that place. That's pretty much it. That doesn't define now who you are as a person just because you're living there. I remember, like, I posted a video like couple years ago. I was like, you don't get into trouble thinking about like, oh, just because I had a brown skin, people from tier 1 country is not going to follow you. That's a wrong perception to think about. Like, I'm a brown skin pretty much all my life. I've been in the space for like quite a while. I have more people out there in tier 1 countries in my circle than most people here in Pakistan.
Yeah.
So how's that even possible? It's possible because I stopped thinking from the inferiority complex at first. And then second, instead of me hoping for it, I just like went for it. That's the other thing. I can't be like, hey, let me see, like, if any company is gonna invite me, I'll like, okay, I'll go learn, work my ass off, and then be able to work with these companies who's not gonna just treat me as another Pakistani VA, because that's something I personally might not gonna enjoy, like sound as a VA. I would be like, hey, I'm working with RJ. Yeah. That's how it is. So that is like perception that they need to build in order to work and like, in a better manner compared to on the other side.
I love that. And I think a lot of people, like, they assume, as the owner of a VA company, they assume that I just work with VAs from the Philippines or Latin America or all these other countries just because of a lower wage, but they don't ever get to talk to me and learn that, like, it's so much more than that, right? Like, sure, there's some economy advantages and some things like that you can obviously use to help scale our companies. But like, if talent was bad, if talent was inferior, that I wouldn't probably go there. And I always tell people, like, I just had a software project done out of India, and they're like, well, did you do that because you were trying to save money? And I said, actually, no, I think I actually spent more money than I would have if I would have hired it here in Dallas. And they're like, well, why did you do that? And I said, well, in my opinion, the company that I chose out of India, like, they were just smarter. They had better technical skills. Like, it had nothing to do with where did they live, what color were they, what race were they, what country were they. It had to do with who's the best person for the job. And I'm sure you know this, right? There's billions of people in the world. I just want the best person for the job. It could cost double. It could cost less. It could cost right in the middle. But like, I just want the best person for the job. So I love that advice. So talk to me about, like, what are your goals now? Like, you obviously know, like, you have a huge network. You could probably start a new business tomorrow, and you probably could go get 20 customers if you called up someone to sell a new offer. So like, what are you doing these days? Like, I know you're still running the podcast agency. Like, talk to like what are your next goals? Like, is it to grow that? Is it to sell that one day? Like, what are you doing right now, and what's your next big goal?
So right now, what we're doing at the moment is definitely growing the agency. So we started like tapping in like more extra channels because I feel like the podcast is something I can do pretty much all the time, but I want other than that something like more predictable or like somebody else can manage, right?
Mm,
So we recently started like a full cold email campaign. We started like a LinkedIn
nice.
outreaches out there, and it's working decently well
Yeah.
because it's just been like 2 weeks running, and we're about to close our first client from cold email. And
Nice.
the part of the reason it worked because we were able to build that authority positioning case study in the past these years. Only then, even on cold email, it would actually work, and the
Yeah.
fundamentals and messaging is clear. So that's something what we are working on right now. Apart from like me doing a podcast, that is my part of doing it. Other than that, I have like other team members who are like one testing playing with like LinkedIn outreaches, other team member like who's playing with like cold email outreaches, all that etc. So we're just like expanding towards more predictable traffic models too, so that we can say like how does that work out eventually also.
I love that. I love that. Let me ask. I know we'll kind of wrap up here in the next few minutes,
Yeah.
but like, I want to ask, like, what is one piece of advice that you would give someone if they're reaching out to someone cold, right? So let's say I was reaching out to, Russell Brunson. I don't know him. I'll use that as an example just because you know him and you had like when you reach out to him, like there's all kinds of like, I know when I open my message DMs, I have a whole bunch of spam. I have a whole bunch of like, crazy comments and like crazy angles and like, some of them I have no mutual friends with and, on Facebook and they look like spam accounts. So like, how did you get through that to make yourself look real, presentable, like someone that like, I mean, I'm sure you didn't just email them and just wait.
Yeah.
I'm sure you had multiple facets. And so whether it's a podcast or just trying to build a connection, what advice do you have for people as far as like how to go get a hold of these people?
Yes, I would say, and this is something I say pretty much all the time, is show them what you can do for them.
Okay. I love
That's
that.
pretty much it. Because if you're just gonna be like, "Hey, I want to do this for you. Can you tell me more things?" They don't have enough time to be brainstorm around that. They would rather skip your message than respond to that because they feel like their time is worth more. Everybody gets so many cold outreach like, "Hey, would you mind like if I do this for you?" All that pretty much all the time across socials. But what if it's gonna be like, "I did this for you, no strings attached. If you really like it, we can definitely talk about something in the future. If not, completely on us."
I love
And
that.
sometimes working on those craft is actually going to cost you less on what you spend on any other avenue to acquire a customer. I've been following a guy from the past 10 years. His name is Chris Van Vliet. He's a huge podcaster, have a number one wrestling podcast in the world right now. Huge wrestling fan I am. And I've been following him from so long. And one time when I got him on the school community, I was like, he really liked my trailer when I posted over there. And he was like, "Hey, like who does your trailers?" I was like, "Me and my team." I was like, "I would like to do one for you too for free at no cost." He's like, "Really?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, man. Just send it over. I'll do it for free. No strings attached. If you just like it, then we'll talk about it. Otherwise, no worries."
Yeah.
We liked it. Literally 3 years later, we have done over 300 podcast trailers so far.
Wow. Wow.
It's like just show them like it hardly costs you money because all it will cost you time, and that's all you have right now.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. That totally makes sense. So what's next? Like, I know you mentioned the cold lead, the LinkedIn. Like, once you grow all of those, like, what are your big goals? Like, I know you accomplished a lot of big goals since 2020, right? Things you probably never imagined, getting the bank accounts and
Yeah.
taking the income in and growing a company. But like, assuming everything goes great in 26, 27, like, what's your ultimate pinnacle goal that you're trying to reach?
Um, Honestly, I don't have a plan right now to do like an agency exit, all that, etc.
Okay.
Right now, I'm still working on to, for example, get to a point with my agency along the years that could be like double or triple my revenue
Okay.
from my agency standpoint where it is right now at the moment, but with more leaner, less dependent on me, right? So right now, since right at the moment we have a team of 10 and we are planning based of like how our clientele is coming on, we are trying to like expand our team, all that, etc., nailing down SOPs, systems, all that, because I feel like if systems aren't there, there's no purpose of just having people,
Yeah.
because then they don't know what to do with it. So yeah, that's the ultimate goal, like growing team, growing client base, and growing the agency without not at the cost of myself.
I love
That's my
that.
goal.
I love that. So we always ask one question to all of our guests at the very end, and we say to be selfish. So if we have listeners here and they have a connection, they have something that could help you out, like what is one thing that you can ask for of my audience to keep their ears and eyes open to if they come across I'll have all your information down below about your agency, about how they can get a hold of you, all your socials, all your different connections. But if someone's like, I found this for you, what would it be? What are you looking for?
At this moment, if you ask me this question, I would be like, hey, I found an untapped channel that you haven't utilized yet.
Nice.
And let me show you how it can be done.
That's
right?
cool.
Because I feel like from a systems or process standpoint, I'm really a really oriented person from that. I have like so many SOPs, and I feel like if you don't have systems, then you can't have a business.
Yeah.
Then it's like a people's show. So yeah, I mean, like that's something that's pretty cool to have. If somebody coming up with a surprise, like, hey man, I did this for you, and somewhere along those lines would be like pretty cool.
I love that. I love that. Now, as we kind of wrap up here, RJ, I'm going to have people down below or information everywhere down below from my team for you. But where's the best place that they can reach out to you if they want to learn more about any of these untapped channels or about the podcast agency that you have running? Maybe they want to have you on their podcast. We have a lot of influential people that watch this. So where's the best place to reach out to you at?
Facebook, my friend. You can search RJ Ahmed on Facebook. You can find me on Facebook. Same name, RJ Ahmed on Instagram, on YouTube. But pretty much like I'm mostly active on Facebook.
I love that. Well, man, I really appreciate you coming on. What time is it over there? I know my guests are.
It's 2 a.m.
2 a.m. Okay, that's what I thought. I also have some developers over in Pakistan as well, and this is usually what time. It's usually about 6 p.m. that I start getting on calls with them. So, man, I really appreciate you staying up late. I know you can do whatever you want as a business owner, so I appreciate you spending time with our audience, and I really appreciate you coming on, man.
Truly appreciate it, Justin. Thanks for having me, and it was really fun talking to you.
Absolutely. Well, guys, with that being said, another great episode on the Leverage Podcast, also known as the Delegation Roundtable. Great guest and RJ here, guys. If you have any questions for RJ, as someone myself, I'm shooting 3 to 4 podcasts per day. And, the agency behind it and the different things that goes into it is not easy, right? If I didn't have my own team in-house here doing it, I would 100% need someone like RJ. So if you guys are thinking about starting your podcast, definitely reach out to RJ and his team to obviously get you off the ground and started, because, man, I wish I would have had a team like yours when I first got started. So, RJ, really appreciate it, man.
Thanks, man. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Until the next episode, guys. Peace. Awesome.